Welcome to Dead Pets, the podcast about pet grief that celebrates the lives of the creatures who have changed ours. I'm your host, Elise Wild, and this is the first episode of Season 2. You can listen to Season 1 on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And at www.deadpetspodcast.com, you can find our episode archives and more information on the podcast. You can also sign up for the Dead Pets newsletter, which is now live, and that is a place where I share thoughts and reflections and revelations from all the conversations I get to have with people about their beloved pets, about their lives, and about their deaths. I also share about my own grief journey, mourning the loss of my 19-year-old cat Dodge, who died a few months ago. It's $5 a month or $40 a year. If you sign up for the Dead Pets newsletter, you'll get access to all of this, and you also get 30% off Dead Pet merch, which will be coming later this year. If you haven't already, don't forget to follow Dead Pets on TikTok and Instagram. There you can find videos of some of the pets that we have featured, and I'm working on other content like ways you can memorialize your pet, information on the stages of grief, and reviews on books about pet grief. On today's episode, Janine tells us about surviving the 4-year cat curse.
I grew up with cats. I grew up in a family of animal lovers. My mom is from a part of Long Island where her house was just like a dumping ground for strays. So when I was born, my family had already had so many pets that they were down to dogs that they had just named girl and boy because they were like out of inspiration at that point. So not surprising that like when I was about to strike out on my own, I was like, I need to do this with a cat. Now, I imagined that I wanted to adopt a male tabby similar to my childhood pet, who I have this cat too of. His name was Tibbs. He was a really chill, fat, handsome tabby boy. He was really cool. I'd already picked out the name Chester. Back in the day, MTV had this late night show. It was hand puppets, sock puppets called Syphil and Ollie. That's where Chester came from. And I was like, Chester's going to be my little travel companion. I'm going to take him everywhere with me, blah, 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 blah. Graduation day, I walk into the Yonkers Humane Society, and there is this tiny little black and white girl who was just like, meow, 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 like just chatting me up from her cage, cute as a button. She looked like that little cat that Pepe Le Pew used to chase. La belle femme skunk fatale. Yeah, she was so cute. And I was just like, okay, this isn't what I pictured, but this is the cat that wants to come home with me. I felt an instant draw to her, and I boxed her up. We put her in the car. We got stuck in traffic over, I think it was the George Washington Bridge. And we get this stink of poop because it turns out that is something that she always did in her carrier. She did not like being transported. She pooped in her carrier. So the first thing I had to do when I got her back to my apartment was give her a bath. And she was the easiest cat I have ever bathed. This cat was like a rag doll. Like just so floppy and limp. And God, she was just so cute. Huge green eyes, black and white tuxedo pattern. The whole time I had her, she had a bow tie collar with her name on it for her little tuxedo. She was so cute. She was fluffy. She was like long haired. Did not like to travel. Was not the thing I tried to impose upon her, but she was everything I needed. And she was just a great little cat. Definitely a soul cat. She wasn't a little baby, but she was not fully an adult yet either. And frankly, even at 21, neither was I. So I feel like we kind of fit well. So I had her in my first apartment with my roommate, who was my college roommate. We're still good friends. She's one of my best friends to this day. We moved to Brooklyn. We were living in Queens. We moved to Brooklyn for a little bit. That was not a great situation. I wound up moving back to Queens to my first apartment by myself. And so then it was just me and Chester for a little while. And I debated, does she want a friend? What should I do? I don't know. But it was just me and her for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then my friend, one of my best friends from my job at that time, my friend Monica, wanted to adopt a cat. And there was a neighborhood cat lady in her neighborhood in Harlem who had this beautiful cat that she rescued from a bodega. He was a Turkish van. So if you're not familiar with that breed, they're gorgeous, gorgeous cats. I don't know where he came from or how he wound up as a street cat, but he had I used to call them artichoke ears. He had these big black artichoke ears, medium long white fur throughout his body, a big black tail, and then black saddles on either side of his white body that looked like the Wu-Tang symbol. He was gorgeous. And we used to call him, because of the Wu-Tang saddles, we used to call him Visa and Ghostface Kitty. Around the time that my friend Monica was figuring out, maybe I'm not really fit for a cat, because it turns out she had allergies. And she was living with him in a studio apartment, and she was also working the night shift for a TV station. So she'd come home at 3 a.m. and he'd be like, "Oh, you're home. Let's hang out. Let's play." And she'd be like, "I've just worked a double shift. I want to go to bed." And he was very chatty. He was a very conversational cat. He'd be like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah," and she'd be like, "Ugh." So she was going to go visit some family in Florida and asked if she could drop him with me for the weekend. And we had a great time. I did not know how Chester was going to respond to him. She'd never had much of a playmate for prolonged periods in her space. So I was like, how's this going to work? He was immediately interested in her. And she looked at him, ate all of his food, pooped in his litter box, and then was like, okay, as long as you understand whose house this is, we're good. She asserted her dominance in that way. And then they became best friends. And so I cat sat for him twice more. And the third time that he came to stay with us, Monica came back from seeing her family and she was like, "Hey, I don't have it in me to come get him today. It might be a couple days. Do you mind hanging on to him for a little while?" And we floated it a little bit. Previously, I was finally just, "Do you want to just not come get him at all? Do you want to just leave him here?" She's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, he and Chester love each other so much. He's happy here. I feel like it takes a lot of stress off of your plate." And so that's how Vikter came into the picture. And Vikter coincided with the man who would be my long-term partner for a while at that point. So he kind of came into the picture, moved in shortly after Vikter came into the apartment. And so then we were a little family of 4. It was the 4 of us then for a few more years, and we had our little family unit and everything was nice. And I have so many videos of the talking back and coming home from work and be like, "Hey, Vikter, what'd you do, buddy?" He was just such a goofball. We got really lucky with the way the two of those clicked, and they loved each other so much. So fast forward, I think that was around 2007. Fast forward then to January of 2012. And we're walking home from a friend's baby shower one night. And it was like a gross, slushy, dark night coming off the subway in Astoria, Queens. And I hear, meow, meow, and I'm like, what is that? And I noticed there's another guy on the sidewalk. And he's, "I think there's a cat under this car." And so we're crouching down and we see there's a Siamese under the car, just like sitting there crying at us. And this other guy that we had met on the street was like, "I can't bring it home because my cat will lose his mind, but I have cat food in my bag. So I kind of want to put some out to try and get him out from under the car." I was like, "Yeah, that'd be great. If you can get him out from under the car, we'll try to coax him home with us and then figure out who he belongs to." Because we were like, there's no way there's just a stray Siamese. That's not a thing, right? Apparently it was, because we got this little guy to follow us home. I was worried he was going to keep us up all night because we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, right? It wasn't huge. It was maybe 600 square feet. So I was like, okay, let's get this guy home. I'll set him up in the bathroom for the night. And I was thinking like, oh, he's going to be crying all night. This is going to be a thing. We made him a little box with a towel in it, and he slept like a baby. He was so good. He was so good. And we put flyers up the next day. Our neighbor was a vet, so we took him over to her vet clinic to get checked out. He had some kind of upper respiratory thing going on. And he was always sneezing. This is so gross, but he was always blowing snot rockets on the wall. But he was so easy to handle. He had a very similar personality to Chester. I could hold him like a baby. I could flip him upside down. He was so chill. And the neighbor who we had taken him to her vet clinic, she kept calling him her sweet Baboo when she was taking care of him. And that just kind of stuck. So we named him Baboo. He was beautiful also. I feel like I got so lucky. All these cats were just stunningly beautiful and had wonderful personalities. But as we got the clear to let him be introduced to the other cats, Vikter was super interested in him. He and Vikter underneath that bathroom door were like building a bond immediately. He was a super sociable guy. He loved to play. He loved to, he loved when you would take the blow dryer and kind of point it at him and he'd try to fight with it. He loved to play fetch with hair ties. So you'd fling a hair tie and he'd run and grab it and he'd bring it back to you and drop it. He and Vikter used to love to play games together. I feel like we had about 2.5 months where everything was going pretty well. Then I started to notice Chester's personality was changing. And there were about 2 weeks of just kind of noticing it, but thinking it was all because of this other cat. Okay, now that Baboo is in the picture, she has more competition for Vikter's attention, and maybe this is impacting her. I don't know. The whole time, Baboo had that upper respiratory thing going on. So we were bringing him back and forth to the vet for more antibiotics, to get him checked up, blah, 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 blah. And so I brought him in and I said to the vet, I was like, could I actually bring Chester in for a quick checkup? My brother had come to town and she loved my brother. She was a big fan of his. And so when he came to visit and she was still acting kind of weird and distant, I was like, okay, this is a little strange. Now I'm worried. What's going on here? So the vet was like, yeah, actually, you can bring her in this afternoon. We can see what's up. I took her in. And the vet took one look at her and she said, her gums are white. This cat is anemic. I don't know what's going on. I think you need to take her to the emergency vet. It was like double oh shit, because suddenly I realized, oh God, what have I been ignoring? I just thought it was all personality based and I thought it was all environmental and, oh, there were changes at home. But I noticed her appetite started to change. And that was one of the first, ooh, maybe I should talk to the vet. And then when my brother came to visit and she was different with him, I was like, okay, now I'm concerned. I need to take her to the vet. We wound up taking her to the Animal Medical Center in Manhattan. They ran a couple tests and they were like, we're really sorry to tell you this, but she has a massive tumor in her stomach. You're really lucky you didn't come home and find her already gone at some point. That was a really hard pill to swallow. I think she was only 9 years old. And I grew up with pets that lived to be like 18 to 20. I got this cat at 21 and was like, Chester will be with me until I'm 40. And here I was like just entering 30 and was like, this can't be happening. Oh my God. So that was a really hard 24 hours. I left her there overnight. I went back the next day. They're like, we're pretty sure this is only going to go in one direction. We could do chemo. We could do this. We could do that. And I was like, I am not going to make that cat travel back and forth from Queens to Manhattan to get chemo treatment. That's a horrible quality of life. I was willing to do more testing just to validate this is 100% certain a terminal diagnosis, right? And so I spent most of that afternoon with her at AMC, but I didn't sleep all night. I was very ill. I have a very physical response to my emotions, so I wasn't doing well. This is something I look back on with regret is I eventually left her there. And when they called me later that day around 4 or 5 in the afternoon to say, okay, yeah, we've confirmed everything via these tests. What do you want to do? And I was like, I think the humane thing to do is say goodbye. But I didn't have it in me to go back there. And it's not something that I'd ever really grown up with putting much thought into, was being with your pet when it's time to say goodbye. It was always something that the vet does that. I feel regret that I didn't have it in me to go back there. But I also, again, it was a first time thing that I'd experienced, so I forgive myself at the same time. That was really hard. That was my baby, and I was really surprised that it was happening that soon. I remember walking out of the AMC to the subway and being on the phone with my mom, and my mom trying to be like, we can lend you money, we'll do anything you need. She was really trying to cheerlead and be like, we'll figure this out. And I was just like, no, she is dying. You need to accept that. I have accepted that. There's no two ways about this. There's not really any room for magical thinking here. The more I fight this, the more she will suffer. So it sucked, but at the same time, I was shocked at how swiftly I moved into the acceptance piece. And then there was also a part of me that was thinking in the sense of the universe closes one door and opens another, and maybe Baboo came into my life at this time for both myself and my partner and for Vikter. to help us deal with this loss. And I remember the day that her ashes came back. Oh my God, she's home. It was such a huge relief. And I remember sitting in my apartment with her little urn and just sobbing. And I'd already cried about her many times, but just the relief I felt of having her back. Because I grew up in rural Vermont. We buried I grew up in the same house that my parents still live in. Most of the family pets were put to rest in our yard when their time came. So this was the first time that I was like, I guess I'll have her cremated. So her ashes came back, and that was a big deal for me. What I could not have anticipated was that 3 months later, in June of 2012, the door that the universe opened was to a basement torture chamber, because my partner and I had gone to another baby shower, interestingly enough. I had been back home in Vermont the week before visiting family and really having an existential moment with myself, trying to really embrace living in New York and trying to make the best of it. I was at a point in my life where I was like, do I want to stay in the city? Do I want to go somewhere else? What do we want to do? My partner at that time, we had started a pet sitting business. He was really good with animals. He wasn't too happy in his day job. I was at a point in my life where all my friends were like, I want to have a baby. I was like, I want a dog. And it was like this overwhelming, I just want a dog, but I didn't want a dog in my apartment. I didn't want to do that to the cats. I didn't really have the space for it. And I have Crohn's disease. So sometimes I don't have it in me to go walk a dog or wake up. Sometimes I need to sleep in and not have an obligation to another living creature. So what I decided was, look at all our neighbors that have dogs. And I said to my then partner, I was like, hey, man, what if you start your own business? Let's get to know our neighbors and walk their dogs, and you can start a pet sitting business. So I had been in Vermont and kind of thinking about all these existential things. I'm like, okay, he's doing good with that business, and I'm really happy. I'm starting to become happier in my day job, and maybe we should just really embrace where we are and make the best of living in the city. I came back. We went out for dinner. We had a really nice time. Went home, went to bed, get up the next day, get ready to go to this baby shower. We are at that baby shower for less than an hour when we get a panicked call from one of our neighbors that there are flames shooting out of our kitchen window. An attendee at that baby shower was a graphic designer for the NYPD. So he was like, get in my car. I'll get you back to your part of the neighborhood. Thankfully, the baby shower was just in Long Island City, so it wasn't very far from where we lived in Astoria. And this couple very graciously got us in their car, sped us home. But it was a total loss fire. And I was not prepared for that. As soon as I got that call, my first, where are the cats? Where the fuck are the cats? Get those cats out of there. And that's not the fire department's priority. Their priority is, this is a row house. How do we stop it from spreading? Because that could have been a catastrophic fire. It really could have spread. And we're very lucky that it did not. Still don't know what exactly caused it. My prevailing theory is that I had a shitty refurbished refrigerator in an apartment with 90-year-old wiring. And when I went in, after everything kind of settled down, it looked like the fridge had caved in on itself. It was awful. It was awful. And there was a photographer there. And I realized after the fact that they were associated with the NYFD. And they were taking pictures of the fire department. But at first I thought they were from the press, and I was ready to deck that guy. I was like, don't you fucking document my trauma. Get out of here. And to this day, when I see a news story or when I see on the local subreddit or anything like that, a picture of someone's house on fire and people being like, there's fire on Welm Street. And I'm just like, get the camera out of there. What do you do? Nobody needs that. The hardest thing for me was that the day when I left, Vikter was sleeping in the closet and I couldn't reach him to give him a kiss. And I gave him like a little scritch, but I didn't give him a kiss. And so that always weighed on me, that I didn't get to give him a final like smooch. I'd be lying if I said that didn't royally fuck me up for a long time. It was a very numb experience driving over there and just hoping against hope. The whole time I was like, as long as they get the cats out, I don't fucking care about anything else. Just get the cats out, just get the cats out. And standing there on the sidewalk waiting to find out what the hell happened and hearing the firefighters talking to each other, and one of them go, hey, you got any update on cats? Oh yeah, man, they're dead. was just like, fuck. I don't think they realized I was standing within earshot when they said it that plainly, but that's when I just lost it. One of my neighbors was a vet, so she very graciously offered to go in and retrieve them for us and to bring them back to her clinic and take care of getting them cremated and all that. And she is the one who reassured us that they died of smoke inhalation. She was the one who was like, they just fell asleep. They were not burned. But it ate me alive to think of them being scared in their final moments. The sound of a smoke alarm and what that must have been like. So that ate at me a lot. The first thing that I thought of after that initial shock, while I'm still standing there, was, fuck me, Chester's ashes. I had just gotten them back. Once everything calmed down, I was allowed to go up. We were on the top floor of a 4-story house. The fire department told us it was okay if we wanted to go in and see what we could salvage in that moment. And so the first thing I went in looking for was like, okay, Chester's paw print. They had made me one of those little paw print mementos. That was safe inside a drawer. So I wasn't too worried about that. But I was like, where is she? Where are her ashes? They had been on a bookshelf. That bookshelf caved on itself and wound up protecting a lot of things. So I found Chester's ashes. They were wet, but they were there. And so that was the first thing I grabbed. I took those. When I first moved to this part of the neighborhood, one of the first friends I made was an elderly Spanish woman, Pilar. She was so cute. And Pilar and her adult daughter and son-in-law were all living in this house a couple doors down from me. And when Pilar's health was declining, they kind of turned the basement apartment into an apartment for her. So there was a king-sized bed, there was a private bathroom. Pilar had passed away earlier that year. And so her daughter and son-in-law very generously offered to let us stay in that apartment. And we're like, you can come stay here while you figure out what you're going to do. So I had taken Chester's ashes over there, and I had a little space where I emptied them out to let them dry. And that was like so weird to see like teeth and bones and stuff. Be like, ah. But I wanted her to dry out. I didn't want her remains to get moldy. And I eventually put her in a fresh bag. She and Vikter are now in a little urn together. The day that we got Vikter and Baboo's remains, that was not as joyous as when I got Chester's remains. That was probably a week or so after everything happened. And in that week, I was going back into our old apartment on a daily basis and like rummaging through stuff and talking to the insurance people and talking to the fire inspectors and I did manage to salvage a lot of sentimental things. So I feel very grateful for that. It was a week of going in and like figuring out if any of the clothes I had were salvageable. And then I washed them like 8 times to get the horrible smell out. It was a really like foggy week, but a very productive week. And I was very like in get shit done mode. And then the day we picked up the boys' ashes, that's when I just took the nosedive. That's when I started to lose it. I remember just going back to the neighbor's house where we were staying and crawling into bed and not getting out of bed for hours. Just hours. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to like engage with anyone. I was just like shut down for a day. But as I was explaining about drying Chester's ashes out, it did bring me more peace to be able to reunite her with Vikter and to kind of have them together. I did have renter's insurance. I could not buy anything in New York City with it. We were looking at new apartments. I had been in that apartment for 7 years. The rent was stable the entire time. It went up $50 when my then partner moved in with me, and that was it. So like I was paying $10.50 a month for a proper 1-bedroom in a beautiful neighborhood. And then I lost it and I couldn't afford a new one because at that point rent was now like a good deal was like $1,800. And back then it was, I feel like today people are like, wow, what a steal. Back then it was just like, ouch, oof. So we tried to make it work. I think we stayed for about 2 months trying to figure out what to do. And I was very grateful. My job was very supportive. Our neighbors were very supportive. We had a really wonderful network. But at the end of the day, I just reached a point of, fuck it, I want to go home. I want my mom. I need a break. Like I was struggling a lot with suicidal ideation at that point. It was dark. It was just a dark time. It's one of those things where I never realized how attached I'd become to my clothes. When I started getting other people's clothes donated to me, it felt like I was wearing a stranger's skin. And I think there's a lot, like, for me at least, wrapped up in that because I had Crohn's disease. I had a really bad flare up. And my doctor agreed, oh, that's probably stress induced from what just happened, losing your cat. I was like, yeah, that could be. So I was homesick with Vikter and Baboo for a couple weeks before this all happened. When it was really, they were my constant companions, keeping me company while I was home going through that. But growing up with Crohn's disease, I was diagnosed when I was 12. I was put on really high doses of prednisone. So like I stopped growing when I was 12. I thought I was always going to be tall like the other members of my family. And I just got stuck at 5'2". And then I gained a ton of weight because of the medication I was on in the 90s, which was a horrible time to be a chubby girl. And there was a lot of like body fluctuation and a lot of like body stuff going on through most of my adolescence. And so throughout my 20s, I'd really stabilized and felt like what I understood my normal look to be came back. Like I didn't have the moon face the way I used to. I dropped some weight. I felt more like my natural self for most of that time. And also during that time is when I cultivated a lot of my personal aesthetic and my personal style. And I was really attached to a lot of that stuff. And so the things after the pets that were the hardest to lose were my books and my clothes. Thankfully, I saved a lot of my photos. That was a remarkable thing, is like a lot of my photo albums were also on that bookshelf and were given some degree of protection when it collapsed. So I have a ton of photos still. They were all a little stinky. Some of them are charred, but like they're still in physical existence. Yeah. This all happened in 2012, but I still have bins in my closet of some of the stuff that I salvaged that I can't get rid of. I can't have it out because it smells awful, but I can't get rid of it. And I actually found and finally did get rid of the bags that Vikter and Baboo's urns came in. I'd still been holding on to them this whole time. And I was just like, I think maybe I thought I would do an art project that would involve those things at some point. And finally I was like, it's okay if you let go of those. You can let go of those things. That's okay. But I still have one of Vikter's teeth. He had a tooth extraction not long before he passed away. So I have one of those that I found. I have like an x-ray that they took of him the night before the fire. All the like, oh, I'm going to make the best of my life here. And then my life there literally went up in flames, right? And so as this was all happening, I was like, maybe I'll rise from the ashes like a phoenix and I'll start a brand new life somewhere else and blah, 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 blah. So we eventually moved back to Vermont, stayed with my parents for a couple of months while figuring out where to live. Because while I could not do anything with the insurance money in New York City, I was able to buy a condo in Vermont at that time. Couldn't do it now because the real estate has gone absolutely batshit post-pandemic. But back then, you could still get a decent place for a rational amount of money. So that's what we did. And I completely threw myself into volunteering at the Humane Society. That was a huge coping mechanism for me, was just spending as much time as I could with animals. And I think that animals demonstrate a resiliency that is really helpful for people to be in proximity to when they've gone through a trauma themselves. So that was very healing for me. It was still a hard time. It was really hard to be carrying around a lot of those feelings and a lot of toxic positivity from people. Everything happens for a reason. That's really hard if you can't find the reason, because it just causes so much more harm. I love if you can find a reason, great, but it's also okay to recognize that sometimes life is just really cruel and fucked up. And there's nothing deeper than that. I had been volunteering at the Humane Society, obviously keeping an eye on pets, wasn't going to adopt any until we were fully out of my parents' house. We closed on the condo in November of 2012. And my mom clocked these two cats that she saw on the Humane Society website. She's like, oh, these cats, they look like they've been through hell just like you. You should see what they have to say. They were these two beautiful tortoiseshell cats that One looked absolutely terrified in her photo, and the other one looked very confident, but was like almost totally hairless from the waist down. You could tell they had been through something, right? Thanksgiving of that year, I had gone in to volunteer to do some animal care and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I said to one of the staffers, I was like, I'm curious about meeting these two cats. Can you show me where they are on the adoption floor? Their names were Zara and Uli. And they were both in one of the shared animal rooms, right? So at my local humane society, they have an adoption floor, they have some multi-level cages for cats, and then they have a couple of rooms for cats who are social and get along with other cats, and they can all hang out in there. So Zara came right on down. She was like up on a perch and came right on down the little ramp to say hi and was very social off the bat. But I could not find Uli anywhere. She was nowhere to be found. And I think it's because she had tucked herself very tightly somewhere to hide. So the next time I came in, they had moved Uli into a cage so that potential adopters could actually have a chance to meet her because no one was meeting her in the cat room. She was hiding too expertly. So she had this, I called it I guess it was like a clamshell bed. It was like a little cave. It was like a pink little bed, but made the cave shape. And so she was hiding in there, and I sat down on the ground and I opened her cage onto my lap and I went, Uli, and she went, whoop, she came right out of that. She came right out onto my lap. Absolutely gorgeous. She was the same size and shape as Chester. She was like the same build, the same big green eyes, a tortoise shell, a totally different pattern, but same fluffy fur. And it was just a reassurance to me that I was like, oh, you know what? I think these are the ones we should get. So on Black Friday, we went in and we wound up adopting them and we brought them home. And my mom did not tell me until much later, but Uli was so tiny, my mom didn't think she was going to make it. She was so underweight. Yeah, she was so she was like barely 6 pounds. They think they were 3 or 4 years old. That's what they estimated them to be. But based on some of the health problems Uli had later, I think they might have been a little bit older. That's also part of why I wanted to adopt them together, thinking like, oh, these poor sisters. The story that I heard was that they had been found under someone's barn. So someone had dumped them and some farmer found these beautiful flea-bitten cats in the proximity of their barn and were like, these are not barn cats. But that's why they were both missing so much fur, is because they had severe flea allergies and had been really like eaten up. So they were scraggly looking when we brought them home. I've never had tortoiseshell cats before. And while it's not a breed, it's just a pattern. There are personality traits that are common amongst torties. And they were definitely Velcro cats. They were both so sweet and so clingy. And their fur grew back and they looked like show cats. They were absolutely gorgeous. This must have been November of 2012. Come 2014, I find out I need my colon removed because it's precancerous. So I'm like, could you cut me a fucking break? I'm like, excuse you, universe. Could you just stop? And that also coincided with my realizing that I was like, I don't know that I have 7 more years of this relationship in me. I had 2 major life things kind of collide at the same time. It was a lot. At a certain point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a mental health break. So I had not been working for a while. I had just started to go back to work that fall, like 3 months before I found out the surgery news. I was like, for Christ's sake, I was like, I've just got a new job. I'm going through an existential thing with my relationship. And now it turns out I have to have this major life-altering surgery. It's a 2-part surgery that I had. They take the colon out. They build a new system called a J pouch with your small intestine. You let that heal for 3 months while you have an ostomy bag, and then you go back. They take the bag out, sew you back up, and then you have to re-potty train in your 30s. You got to learn how to poop again. Zara was the best nurse I have ever had. That cat was so good. I came home from the hospital and the first thing I did was lie down on the couch. And the first thing she did was try to climb on top of me. And I was like, whoa, don't step on the ostomy bag. Watch it. And she immediately learned to not sit on that side of my body. She was so smart. Uli was lovely too, but Uli was heavily jealous of Zara. I thought I'm doing these cats a favor by adopting them together. No, they were not bonded. They were not bonded at all. They were sisters, but they were like, Uli was like half the size of Zara and routinely kicked the shit out of her. She was a scrappy little thing. She was very rough. And Zara was like the sweetest cat I've ever met in my life. I used to tell people, I always make jokingly mean nicknames for my cats, or I always call Uli my rotten little cat. I used to like playful insults. I couldn't do that to Zara because she was just so sweet and innocent all the time. The only time I ever saw her break that mold was when I would dog sit. I kept dog sitting a little bit in home when we moved up here. And she was very assertive towards dogs. And that was hilarious to watch because she was just this sweet, beautiful gumdrop of a cat. And then a dog would show up and she'd be like, I'm going to sit on your toy and I'm going to bully you into the corner and you're not coming near me. She was very aggressive with those dogs. She was a badass. She was such a great cat. And so I got through the surgeries. All that went okay. My now ex moved out and I was doing okay for about maybe a year and change. And then in October of 2016, I woke up in a really intense funk one morning. I often describe this day as feeling like time was folding in on itself and the past and the present were really close together because I woke up just thinking about Baboo and Vikter and Chester and my old life and just feeling that heaviness of mourning, just mourning the life that I lost. And Zara came into bed with me and she was cuddling with me and she was purring and she was being so sweet. And again, with this godforsaken positive thinking, I looked at her and I said to myself, gosh, that was all horrible to go through. But if I didn't go through any of that, I wouldn't get to be here with you now. And then she started yowling and hid under the bed and she was panting. And I was in utter denial that anything big could be happening. And I called her vet and they were like, you should probably take her to the emergency vet. So I put her in her carrier and I drove to the emergency vet. And she let out a really loud yowl in the car. And in that moment, I was like, oh, fuck me. Did she just die? And I got to the emergency vet and I was like, I think she died in the car. And they took her in and they came and confirmed to me, this cat is deceased. Would you like us to try to resuscitate her? Which, fuck you for offering that to someone in a hysterical state. Can I just say? My stupid ass said yes. I was like, yes, do whatever you can. I walked in with a dead cat and walked out with an $800 bill. And I was beside myself. How the fuck could this 4 dead cats in 4 years? It just was such a cosmic cruelty. I remember very clearly when I got her in her carrier and I was walking out of my bedroom, Uli was across the hall in the guest room and she just looked at me and I looked at her and we had this moment of, is it just you and me now? That was probably the most traumatic of them all. You'd think the fire would be, but that was just such a cosmic fuck you. I was like, ow, why? How could you? I wanted at least 10 years with these cats. That was really hard. I remember coming home and making a joke about this one will probably live forever because Uli was always the little problem child. She had more of an attitude, blah, 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 blah. She wound up being another soul cat. And in the end, I looked back and realized that I wound up having more time alone with Uli than any other cat, even Chester. It was me and Uli on our own for a while after that. A lot of her personality seemed different just because she didn't have another cat to be jealous of. It used to be that if Zara was sleeping in the bed and Uli jumped in the bed and realized Zara was there, she would growl and run away. And many mornings I would wake up and Zara would be in the bed with me and I'd get up and Uli would jump out from under the bed. And I'd be like, were you sleeping there the whole time? So suddenly she didn't have this competition. She loved being an only child. She loved it. It was very hard for me at first, but it was, I think, always an easy adjustment for Uli. But then there's a lot of pressure, right? Because I'm like, oh my God, 4 cats in 4 years. What are you going to do? What are you going to pull on me? I took this cartooning class, I think it was that winter. And we had to put together a 4-page comic. And I was like, I have 4 dead cats, so maybe I'll make a comic and each page will be dedicated to each cat and how I came to find them, some of their unique traits, right? Chester had this little smush on her nose that looked like a raisin got stuck there. And I had mentioned to you, Vikter had the Wu-Tang saddles. And Baboo had these really beautiful stripes under his markings, which maybe that's common in Siamese. I've never had one before. So that was really, but like very unique to me. And Zara had this beautiful gold stripe down her nose that made her kind of look like an owl. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll play with this. And I never got to finish it in that workshop. But part of why I never pushed myself to finish it was like, where does this leave Uli? That was kind of like the joke at the end of the 4th page after Zara passed away was like, this doesn't bode well for you, Uli. But I was like, oh God, I don't want to, curse her. What am I doing? Okay, so I'm just going to sit on this. In December of what would have been that 5th year, she was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. She had a really enlarged thyroid gland, and I didn't want to put her through surgery. The vet that I was seeing was like, to be honest, the gold standard would be a radiation treatment. It's not a big deal in terms of administering it. It's just a single shot, but she's essentially radioactive for 10 days, so needs to be quarantined. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think the hyperthyroidism is going to kill her, but I worry that the stress of being quarantined will. So I was really scared about that. But I also felt like it was the best guidance. It was better than trying to give her medication every day. It was certainly better than bringing her in for surgery. They were like, if you have the thyroid gland removed, she could wind up with hypothyroidism, and then it goes in the other direction. I'm like, okay. I'm very lucky that one of my good friends from high school is also a vet, so I kind of have her as a sounding board for second opinions. She was like, I would definitely do what your vet is recommending. But I was just like, oh my God, if you die, that's 5 cats in 5 years. You have to make it to January. You have to make it to January. It was the emergency vet that does this specialty treatment. She was there for about 10 days and they had a live feed so you can keep an eye on them. It's cool, but the feed wasn't working reliably. So more often than not, I'm just refreshing and watching a very slow stop motion of my cat throughout the day. And there was one day, I will say she was the most spoiled cat at that clinic because I gave them a bunch of stuff. They're like, you can't have any of this back because it's going to be contaminated with radiation. I was like, oh, I know. I bought her a pocket bed. I had a second version of one of her favorite toys. I was like, I want her to have as much stuff that will fit in this cage to make her feel at home so that she has familiar smells and so that she has, more importantly, a place to hide in her little pocket bed. So there was a day where I did not see her come out of that bed all day. And finally I caved and I called and I was like, can someone just go poke her and make sure she's alive? And they're like, oh, nobody who's qualified to go in the radiation room is here because it's after general work hours. But they were all fed earlier and nobody noticed anything wrong. And I was like, go poke her. I was just like, just tell me I was like, that's not good enough. I was like really freaking out, but trying not to take it out on them. I was internalizing a lot. I got off the phone. I think I took an Ativan for anxiety. I had an emergency supply left over from surgery. I was afraid of getting addicted to opioids, so I wrote out a lot of my colectomy on Ativan, which is also addictive, but less scary. So I still had a little stash of that kicking around, and I popped one of those and was like, oh God, what am I going to do? And then I went and checked the feed, and she just came out of her little pocket bed and was like yawning and stretching, like, oh yeah, I've had such a good sleep. And I was like, oh my God, where have you been all day? Like, do you know what you did to me? She wound up coming home in January. That was also hard because I wasn't allowed to have her on me for prolonged periods. They were like, don't let her sleep in your room. Don't let her sit on your lap for more than 5 to 10 minutes at a time. You need another week for everything to really die down and not be a risk to you. And so that killed me because every night she was at my door like, Ma, like, why can't I sleep with you? I'm just like, I'm so sorry. But oh my God, that was just such an immense relief to get her home from that and feel like, okay, we've made it. We're past year 5. I hope this curse has been broken. And she was an older cat. That was the moment that had us questioning her age because they were like, well, on paper, she's 9. But these are all health problems that don't usually present until they're about 12. I was like, okay, this is good to know. And so in the years that followed, she did come down with a kidney disease diagnosis. And then they suspected she had, this was right before the pandemic, they were suspecting she might have intestinal lymphoma. And they were like, it could also be IBD. When I was like, that would be funny because I have IBD, I have Crohn's. That's hilarious if we both have that. I was like, I don't know what the best treatment option is here because I don't want to give her an endoscopy. I don't want to go through these things to like formally diagnose it. What we could do is we could give her an oral chemo medication. I was like, okay, let's try that. The oral chemo gave her a seizure. And the first time I didn't know. I came home from work and she was hiding under the guest bed and I was like, where are you? And she came out from under the guest bed like something had freaked her out. And I was like, oh my God, did something scary? Did a loud plane come by? Or were they doing work? Like sometimes when they come and do the gutter cleaning, it's really scary for the cats. And then a week later, she was supposed to get her second dose. We're sitting on the couch together and all of a sudden she just starts like trembling. And then she shot across the room and just started like spinning all over the place like the Tasmanian devil. She was just like all over the place. And I did not know what was happening. I grabbed her, she settled down, I got her into her carrier, and then I'm driving to the emergency vet. Like, please don't, going through like the trauma of what happened with her sister. I'm like, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die, please don't die. I can't handle another, like, you're dying on the way there. And she responded every time I talked to her. It's like she knew I needed the reassurance. And so every time I'm like, Uli, are you okay? Oh, thank God. Our emergency vet is on the other side of a very small bridge. I did not realize that bridge was under construction. And so I got there and then I had to go all the way around like another 2-mile detour just to loop back out on the other side of that bridge to get to the emergency vet office. I was losing my mind. But bless her little heart, the entire time she was meowing. Every time I'd say something, she'd meow back to reassure me she was there. I got her to the emergency vet. They said it's very likely that it was the chemo medication. It can have a neurological side effect. We'll give her fluids to try and help flush it out of her system. But you can take her home tonight and follow up with her normal vet. And so I said to the normal vet, if an alternative, regardless of whether this is lymphoma or IBD, would just be steroids, let's just give her fuck the chemo meds. Let's just put her on steroids. And thankfully, she was pretty good about letting me medicate her. So we had that was right before, I think that was late 2019 that was going down. And so that was amazing going into the pandemic and having all this time together and recognizing that she was nearing the final chapter of her life, but that I was getting to spend so much time, like all of it with her. It was great. And so that was going to be my final chapter of the comic as that was starting to present itself. I was like, oh, let's talk about unprecedented times. This is an unprecedented relationship I'm having with my cat at the end of their life. I'm finally getting to see a full life stage with one of my cats. And she did pretty well through the pandemic, though that is when she started to look old. It's just like a light switch. One day they're just old. It was hard to see her struggle to play because she was one of the most playful cats I've had. She was super, super playful, always very active. And it was towards the end of the summer of the pandemic, like the summer of 2020, that I met my now partner. And he is from Albania, where cats just live outside. Animals just live outside. They're not really kept as pets the way we keep them here. But Uli loved him and he loved her, and they just hit it off really well from the get-go. So that was really nice to see. And getting to spend that time with her during the pandemic was wonderful. And seeing this relationship like she built with my partner was really nice too. And in the 2 years that followed, she was starting to decline and it was becoming more obvious. And I think I brought this up because my partner noticed one day the difference in her trying to run up the stairs. And it was early to mid 2022. And he was like, oh, I saw Uli at the bottom of the stairs. Like she was going to go run up it like she always does. And she just kind of couldn't. I was like, oh man, that sucks. Like that, just seeing her slow down was hard. She passed away in November of 2022. And that was everything I wish I could have given to my other cats. I feel like I finally got a happy ending with one of my cats. I called her my little curse breaker for that. So I got to spend all this time with her towards the end of her life. At one point, she had to have sub-Q fluids, which I'm terrible at administering. And my friend that I mentioned before, who's a vet, was so gracious in coming over and spending time with us and helping to give the fluids and helping to coach me too about figuring out like, when is the time to let go? I wanted her to be the one to kind of guide that. But it was also good to hear from my friend, like, hey, you have to take your life quality into consideration as well. Like, what is it doing to you? How much sleep are you losing staying up to take care of her? Because part of the kidney issue, too, was that, like, she'd go into a deep sleep and she wouldn't always know that her bladder would empty. So I have pictures still of all of the pee pads that I was lining my mattress with. Like, I would put all these pee pads down and then an old sheet over it to make the bed, because I was like, I'm not going to kick her out of the bed in her last, like the very last chapter of her life. No fucking way. My partner was working a travel job at the time, so he was usually living in a different city. I would come back, like ping-ponging back and forth. I was just like, I'm taking advantage of having all of this space to myself and like doing things my way. And thankfully he had come back right before she decided like, this is it. So we were both able to be here for her. My vet was willing to come do a home euthanasia. They don't usually do home visits, but they will do that service. But that was a really remarkable couple of months of communicating with my cat. And I think if I went back to school now, I would probably want to study animal communications and animal behavior and relationships, because there were so many moments where it was clear as day to me that Uli was communicating with me. There was one day where she hadn't eaten, she hadn't come out from under the bed. It was like maybe 3:30 in the afternoon. And I was like, I need to call this. Like, I don't want to wait until the vet is closed and then I have to take her to the emergency vet. And I was like crying and like talking to myself. And I picked up the phone and was about to start dialing. And she popped out from under the bed and went over to the food and ate. What are you doing? I'm not done yet. I'm still here. I'll eat. Relax. You're jumping the gun. I was like, okay, wow, okay. I wish you'd done that an hour ago, but still. And one of my favorite memories from this end of her life was she was really struggling with eating. And something that I was doing for her was making ground pork. You don't usually give cats pork. It's high in sodium. It's not really a part of their natural diet. But the vet and I had discussed it because I was like, I was eating dinner one night and she went nuts after my pork chop. And I thought, if this is going in one direction anyway, like, why not let her have whatever she wants to have? And it was like, yeah, that's fine. We discussed it. She was like, that's fine. I wouldn't make it her primary diet. But like you said, if it's what she's got an appetite for at this point, go ahead. So I had cooked up a pork chop and put it through the food processor, and I brought it upstairs, and like, she hadn't touched any food all day. I'd given her several different flavors to try. She didn't want anything. I brought this pork up and she was like, bing, oh my God, pork. And she took 3 bites of it. And then she looked at me and she went, brr. She gave me like a chirp and a headbutt, like, thank you. It was like such a clear thank you. And I watched the whole like process, like, of her stopping and looking at me and like expressing that gratitude. And I was just like, I'll never forget that. I will never forget that moment of just feeling so clearly communicated to by my baby. The day that it became clear to me that she was ready to go, it was hard, but it was also easy. It was, okay, I feel like this is what you want. You are ready. I kind of wish she had just gone in her sleep, of course, but she needed a little assistance. It was a beautiful ending to the 5-cat drama of finally being able to have a proper end of life for this one cat. There was a lot of peace that came with being able to give Uli a proper send-off and to really just, I don't want to say wrap up the trauma, because I think it's always going to be like buried in me somewhere. But it helped. It definitely helped to finally have a cat that just got the peaceful ending they deserve. It was a hard night. She was not settling down all night. She was jumping up, but she wasn't really jumping because she didn't have the leg strength anymore. And she was barely 3 pounds at this point. She had gotten very tiny. Yeah. At that point. But I had a little step stool next to the bed to try to help her get in and out. And like she kept missing the steps. She was stumbling a lot. Eventually I moved to the floor. I have a large dog bed that the cats love. That's just under the bed. So she would sleep on that. She spent a lot of time sleeping on that. She was struggling to walk. She was struggling to get up and down from the places she liked to spend her time. And sure enough, when the vet came, the first thing they do is they give them a shot of sedative before they give them the drug that stops their heart. As soon as she got that sedative, she stopped breathing. She just was like, whew. I was like, whoa, I think she's already gone. They're like, oh, she very well could be. I don't think she really needed a very hard nudge to get over the line. I'd had several fake outs up until that point. It wasn't a shock to me that it was finally time. I'll always be so horrified at the way her sister passed away, but I am happy for Uli that we were able to have that time together, just the two of us. She was very content to be the only cat in my life, and she was a special little one. She was a lot of fun. She was very fun.
What was it like living without Uli at first?
My partner had just gotten off the road. He had left his previous job and was taking a little time off. So it was really nice for me to have him here and to have that company while going through that. And it was also nice to be freed up to travel and move around more. Because it was a point where, like, when I'd go see him, when he was working nearby, like I'd go down to New York a lot to go visit, but I'd be stressed out. Oh my God, I'm leaving my elderly cat for a few days. What if she dies? And that was my biggest concern, was like, please don't do it while I'm gone. Please don't leave while I'm gone. Please wait till I come home. So there was that kind of relief almost of, okay, now I can move around a little bit more freely. As cheesy as it sounds, it's okay to recognize that it's freeing to not have to play caretaker to that degree anymore. And like I said, it was like that with Uli. It was like, oh, okay, I can travel without stressing anymore. And yeah, the income piece, that's not a small part either. That was also why I was like, wow, I actually am not going to miss having to spend this much money on the vets and on the medicine and on all these things that I was investing in to keep her comfortable. It was like, wow, okay, it would be okay to just let my bank account recover for a little while.
Where do they all live around you now?
I now have a shelf that I call my shrine of fallen felines. So that's where all their little urns are. They have their little paw print indents are there. I have some cat art. I have an artist friend up here who makes a lot of cat-related art, and she has one that is a cat Grim Reaper. Yeah, my friend Martha, Deadly Martha, if you want to look her up on socials. So yeah, I have the little cat Grim Reaper sticker there. I have a really cool holographic postcard of a cat that one of my friends sent me. I have a friend from back in the city who, she's not on social media, so we do a lot of postcards. And we're both big cat ladies, so that's nice. I have a lot of cat paraphernalia on that shelf with them. When I first moved in here and it was just the cats from New York, it was important to me to feel like they were still a part of my life. And they're still in my living room, even if they're not actively in the living room. I like having them just ingrained in my home and still present in a way. Uli used to fall asleep on my wrist and her little fang would stick out and it would jab me right about there. So after she passed away, my partner got a job that needed him to be in Brooklyn a few times a week. So I started ping-ponging between Vermont and New Jersey, where he was living while he had this job. And there was a tattoo parlor right around the corner. I started brainstorming what's a good memorial tattoo for Uli. I have another one that came from Vikter when back in the day we were watching this little Pomeranian dog for a neighbor, and he had gone out for a walk, and I'd let Vikter come out of the bedroom to walk around a little bit, but the dog came home faster than I anticipated. So I went to pick Vikter up to put him back in the bedroom, and he freaked out because of the dog and accidentally scratched me, and it left this scar. So after he passed away in the fire, I was like, I want this scar outlined in white ink so it never fades. And I went to the first tattoo parlor I ever went to where I got the tattoo of my childhood cat, and it was a different person working there, and he had such an attitude about, I don't do white tattoos. I'm like, do you want the easiest money you've ever made in your life, my man? Come on. He wouldn't do it. So I found a shop in Astoria, and there was a super nice dude there who also loved animals, was really hyped to do it for me. It was like a $60 thing. I was like, again, do you want the easiest money you've ever made in your life? This is a 2-inch white line. I was really grateful I wound up at that shop because that guy was super nice, and we talked about animals for a long time, and I feel like it was a more appropriate way to commemorate Vikter by working with that guy.
What did Uli teach you?
Curses can be broken. Even if positive thinking doesn't pay off in the moment when you need it, or even if the universe delivers you an immediate clap back when you're trying to be more positive, there can still be a positive outcome even when you're going through a very dark period. I think she taught me a lot of resilience. And again, what I was saying earlier about the healing nature of working with all those shelter pets and the resilience of animals, I think that is why a lot of people who have endured a trauma are attracted to animal welfare and animal rescue work and seeing what animals can bounce back from. Because yeah, she and her sister were in bad shape when we got them. They looked so ratty. The poor things were so flea bitten. Uli was just such a toughie, a sweet, tough little thing. And I think that is another thing she kind of taught me is don't live in your assumptions about them either, because she was such a more loving and joyful little creature than I thought she was, purely because she was jealous of her sister. And when it came down to just being the two of us, I got to see a much more robust, fully joyous side.
If there is an afterlife where we get to see our pets again, and Chester, Vikter, Baboo, Zara, and Uli are waiting for you on that rainbow bridge, what is the first thing that you will say to them?
Oh man, I feel like I'm sorry would be a big one. I would want to apologize to Chester for not being there in her final moments. I would want to apologize to Vikter and Baboo for not staying home that day. Because that was another thing is it was a whole like, oh, I'd really love to just stay home and take a nap. And I was, no, we should go to my friend's party. We really were pushing ourselves to get out of the house that day. And so there's a part of me that I want to apologize to them for leaving. And I want to apologize to Zara for not recognizing how dire her situation was immediately. It wasn't like I spent an hour sitting around being like, we'll be fine. But I probably wouldn't have wasted 10 minutes calling the vet and trying to figure out what do we think's going on. It was something that came on really suddenly, and I don't think the outcome would have changed if I had acted any faster, but it is something that I still feel guilty about and would want to apologize to her for. And then with Uli, I'd probably sing her a little gibberish song. I sing a lot of gibberish songs to my pets, but I used to sing her little songs driving to and from her vet appointments to try and keep her calm. But more than anything, I would just want to give them all kisses.
Thanks for listening. Dead Pets is a Wild Media Industries production. It is written, hosted, and edited by me, Elise Wild. If you have a dead pet that you would like to share, please reach out at deadpetsofficial@gmail.com. Follow Dead Pets on TikTok and Instagram, and sign up for the Dead Pets newsletter at www.deadpetspodcast.com. And remember, until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened. Anatole France.